Hi, this is Darren Lyle, and welcome to Creating a Game Environment in Blender and Unity. In this course, what I'd like to do is work on creating a project, an interior apartment scene that uses Blender and Unity in kind of an integrated way from the very beginning. I've seen a lot of courses that go over creating game objects in Blender, modeling, UV mapping, maybe even texturing. And then at the end they say, and then you take it into Unity. Or I've seen a lot of courses where it's about Unity and all the assets have already been made and you're bringing them into Unity at the beginning and then going from there. What I'd like to do is show you how I kind of use Blender and Unity from the very beginning of the project. I think it's important to be able to go back and forth easily and quickly between the two programs as you create your environment. It's the way I do it, and hopefully what you can get out of it is maybe some ideas that you can apply to your process. So, having said that, here we are in Blender. I think the first thing we should do is take a look at our scale and what unit of measure we're going to be using throughout the project. So, Blender by default, when you first open it up, has these Blender units. I'm going to come over here to the Scene button, and you can see here under Units we've got None, which is the default Blender unit, and then you've got Metric and the Imperial system of inches and feet. I'm here in America, and so I am surrounded by the Imperial system of inches and feet. If you're anywhere else in the world, then you're probably using the metric system. Now, Unity's basic unit of measure is the metric system, is 1 meter. So if I switch here in Blender from none to metric, you can see that not much happens. You go back from none, metric, there really isn't any difference. However, if you switch over to the Imperial system, you can see that the grid switches to feet and the grid shrinks a bit. But ultimately, it's still the same size. This cube is still the same size. So let's take a look at it. I'm going to press the N key to bring up the Properties panel here. And if I go up, scroll up a bit, you can see I've got Location, Rotation, and Scale, and then I've got Dimensions. And here under Dimensions, you can see that this cube is 2 meters by 2 meters. Now, if I switch from metric to imperial, you can see that it switches to 6.562 feet, which is 2 meters. So the size of your objects don't change when you switch your units of measure. You're just measuring the size in a different way. But to make things easier, we should probably use the metric system. Now, if we open up Unity, I'm going to go ahead and open up Unity here. And I'm going to go ahead and create a new project. And I will call this, I'll just call this Unity so I know it's a Unity project folder. And then I'll just call this Apartment, because I'm going to be creating an interior apartment scene here. And I'll just make sure that I'm using 3D instead of 2D. Just click on 3D there and create project. So here we are in Unity. Now if I come over here and right click in the hierarchy, I can create a 3D object, and I'll just create a cube. And I'll make sure that this is in the center of the grid. It is. The position is 0, 0, 0 over here in the inspector. To move around in Unity is a little bit different than Blender. You mainly use the Alt key and then click and drag to tumble, Alt middle mouse button to pan, and Alt right mouse button to zoom, and you can also scroll the mouse wheel to zoom as well. So it's a little bit different navigation, but you kind of get used to it after a while. If you've ever used Autodesk Maya, it's the exact same way of navigating within the 3D view. In addition, if you want to move or rotate or scale, it's a little different than Blender. You can always come up here and choose the move, rotate, and scale tools right up here. or you can press W for move, E for rotate, and R for scale. So that allows you to switch quickly with the W, E, and R keys. All right, so this cube is actually 1 meter by 1 meter. So let's do a little test here. Let's test taking a cube from Blender into Unity and make sure our pipeline is working the way we want it to. All right, so we have a 1 by 1 cube here. That's good. I'm going to switch back to Blender here. And let's change the dimensions of this cube. I'm just going to come into the dimensions field here and type in 1 tab 1 tab 1 and enter. And so now we have a cube that is 1 meter by 1 meter. All right, I'm going to call this, I'm going to name this cube, I'm going to call this Blender cube for the name of it. And in addition, what I'm going to do is add a material to it. So I'm going to come over here to the materials panel, and it already has a default material. Now I'm using the Cycles render engine. I just have that on by default whenever I create a new Blender scene. But if you're using the Blender render engine here, that's fine too. It doesn't really matter because our final materials and our final rendering are going to take place in Unity in-game. So I'm going to name this material the same thing I've named my cube. I'll copy this and I'll just come over and paste this right into here. All right, so now I have an object with a name and a material ready to go over to Unity. There are a couple different ways to do this, but the way I like to transfer projects into Unity is by using the FBX file format. Now you can drag a blend file directly into Unity, but all it does is open up Blender in the background, use Blender's FBX converter to convert the file to FBX, and then close Blender in the background. So if it's going to use Blender's FBX converter anyway, why not go ahead and do it here? So I'm going to come up here to File, and I'm going to go to Export, and I'm going to choose FBX. Now this particular scene has a few elements in it. It's got a camera, it's got a point light, it has my cube, but I only want to export that cube. So I'm going to choose Select Objects, or Selected Objects right down here. I have that cube selected. I'm going to browse to the folder that I want to export to. I think I'm going to create a whole new folder here called Exports. And that will be kind of the transitionary place where I'm going to put my FBX files before I take them into Unity. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder here, call it Exports, and open that up. Now I'm going to give this a name. What did I call this? I called it Blender Cube, didn't I? So we've got Blender Cube FBX. I've chosen Selected Objects. I'm using this FBX 7.4 binary version. And now I'll just click Export FBX. All right, so there it goes. Now here in Unity, we need to bring that object into the Assets folder. And there's a couple of things I want to point out as we do. Now, if you want to just bring one item into the Assets folder here, you can right-click in the Assets folder and go to Import New Asset. And that will bring up a browser window that will allow you to go to your folder and find your file. Now, if you look up here, it says you can also import files by dragging them. So if you have multiple files, multiple FBXs or textures or whatever, you should just open up your Windows Explorer, your Finder window, whatever, select the multiple files and drag them directly into the Assets folder here. But since I only have one to bring in, I'm going to just use this process. Select the Blender cube and click Import. Now the reason why I gave that cube a material is because I wanted to show you this. Whenever you bring in a new object, it's going to bring in its materials and it's going to look for a folder called materials, and if it can't find one, it will create one and put that material in it. So what I always do is that when I bring a model in, when I bring an FBX in, I always bring it into the root assets folder and let it drop the material into the materials folder. It's just easier that way. But what I'm going to do is make sure I keep everything neat and tidy. So I'm going to go ahead and right click, choose create, choose folder, and I'm going to call this models. And this is where I will put all the models I bring in. So once again, I'm going to bring any new models into the assets folder here. It will automatically drop the material into the materials folder, and then I'll just drag that object into the models folder. All right, let's take a look at this and see how we did. I'm going to click this Blender cube and drag it up here into the hierarchy and drop it. And here it is, but I don't see it. That's because it's right inside that cube. And this is a good thing. Notice that our 1x1 cube in Unity is matching exactly our 1x1 cube in Blender. That's exactly what we want. So the takeaway from this is to be sure and set up your unit of measure ahead of time so you know exactly how big things should be. Now I know that 1 meter in Blender is going to equal 1 meter in Unity, and I'll have a good sense of how big things should be as I begin creating the objects. Now there's another thing I want to mention here in Unity, and that's the camera. Now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to bring in our environment models here from Blender, and then we're going to want to be able to run the game and move through the scene to check out how everything is looking. So what we need to do is have a camera that we can move around once we turn on the game. If I run the game now and I click the play button right up here, you can see here's our game, but I can't move around. I can't look around, I can't move around with the WASD keys, I can't do anything. So let me hit the play button again to turn Unity off, turn the game off there. So what I want to do is create a ground plane here in Unity that we can run around on as we bring in our objects. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this cube, and I'm going to go ahead and delete this cube as well. Just right click and choose delete. And now I'm going to go to Blender and use Blender to create a ground plane just for the floor. This may not be our final floor, but I think it's a good thing to do once again to test our pipeline, to test our process, and to get used to going between these two programs. So I'm going to select everything here with the A key and just press X and delete. So now we just have a clean scene here. I'm going to go to the Create tab and create a polygon plane. And I'm going to scale it up so it's about as big as the grid here. And if I press the N key and go up to the top, you can see that I've created a polygon plane that's about 16 meters by 16 meters. Now, let's go ahead and say 20 by 20. Why not? Let's do that. I'm going to give this a name. I can come over here to the outliner and call it, just call it floor. Once again, this may not be the final floor, but it's going to serve its purpose here. I'm here in the materials panel, so I'll click new. And with this new material, I'll call this floor. I just like to try and keep the materials and the object names, if not the same, have some sort of a relationship. Also, I think I'll press the tab key to go into edit mode, and I think I want to add some polygons to this floor. Currently, it's just one big polygon. So I'm going to press the W key and choose subdivide. And you can see that it's subdivided this into 4 polygons. I'll come over here and increase the number of cuts from 1. Oh, maybe let's go up to 5 here. And with 5 cuts, it looks like I've got 36 faces on this. That looks fine to me. Here it is, if I hit the A key. All right, so let's go ahead and take this into Unity as well. So I'm going to go to File, Export, FBX. I'll call this floor. And notice here I've still got my selected object checked. I'm still in the exports folder here, so I'll just click Export FBX. All right, let's go over to Unity. Now here in Unity, I'll go ahead and open up a Finder window here. And in here, I'll go into my exports and grab that floor and drag it in. Now I'm going to drag it over here into the assets folder so that when it comes in and wants to drop its material into a materials folder, it'll see that materials folder. There it is. And now I'll just take that model and drag it into the models folder. All right. So now I'm going to grab that floor, drag it into the hierarchy. It'll drop into the scene. It's at 0, 0, 0 in the position fields here. That's good. So there is our first object. Now, it is currently selected. To deselect it, you can click anywhere, or you can just click and drag with the mouse as well. All right, so what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to run around on this plane. Currently, if I hit the play key, you can see we can't move at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to import one of the pre-made packages that comes with Unity that has a first-person controller in it that I can use to run around and test my scene. So I'll come over here to the Assets folder, right-click, and go to Import Package. And under here, I'm going to bring in the characters package that comes with Unity. Here it is, the whole thing. I'm going to click Import. And what it will do, it will create a standard assets folder, and it will have the character package in that standard assets folder. All right, so here's that standard assets. Here's my characters. And right in here in first person controller, we've got a folder called prefabs. If I open that up, you can see we've got two first person controllers. One is an FPS controller, and that has quite a bit of stuff on it, components on it, including an audio source here. So if we take a look at this one, the rigid body FPS, this one doesn't have any audio on it, and this is the one I usually use. So I'm going to take this and drag it up into the hierarchy, and there it is. So it's been dropped in here at 0, 0, 0, but it needs to be pulled up just a bit so it's just above the ground plane. Now if I hit play, I can now move around, but the problem is I'm just falling now. I've fallen down through the polygon plane. So what I need to do is create a collider that'll keep me from falling down through it. So what I can do is choose this floor object here and add a collider to it. So if I come over here to add component with the floor selected and go to physics and box collider, that will add a box collider to that object so that now when I hit play, I don't fall through. So now I can move the mouse around and WASD and move and run around this polygon plane. All right, so this is going to be our our test area. I'm going to hit escape, and then I can push the play button here. So that's just going to be our test area that we can run around and take a look at our scene as we build it. Now notice down here it says there are 2 audio listeners in the scene. You need exactly one. One thing we can do is delete this main camera because it has an audio listener on it, and so does this camera as well. So that's the problem. Let's go ahead and take this main camera that came in the scene when we first opened it and delete that. Right click and delete. So now we only have one camera in the scene, and that's good. I'm going to change the name of this. I think I'll just call it player. There we go. And now if we run the game again, you can see that error goes away and we can run around on the floor. All right. Good. So now we've set up our scene in Unity. We can begin working in Blender and bring in our assets piece by piece.